I've been making a series of short videos about the ethnic cleansing of James VI, and in this video I'm going to try and summarise those actions that more than any other still resonate to this day, which is why I've brought you to Ireland. Britain, Northern Ireland, Ulster, shit! Can I just say New Scotland?
No, you cannot. Get on with it.
If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. In the meantime, let me tell you the story. The difficulty in knowing what to call this place shows just how traumatic the impact of a policy implemented by our cute and cuddly James VI of Scotland after he'd become the heinous and horrific James I of England. So remember as we go, anything good, Scottish. Anything bad, English. If you're not sure, British. If it makes you want to cry, sing or cross an ocean, it's probably Irish. Joking aside, if you've watched my other videos on the ethnic cleansing of James VI, you'll have worked out that the events that I'm about to describe weren't unique. They were a continuation of something that started when he was King of Scots. He didn't think much of the Gaels, a barbarous people with a barbarous tongue that needed to be civilised or extirpated. Now, until 1603, the Gaels that he hated were in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. When he became King of England, he had a whole new bunch of Gaels to civilise through dispossession. But why here? Why not in the south of Ireland? Why Ulster? Let me explain. The English crown began Irish colonisation way back in the time of Henry II, whose son was Richard the Lion of the Crusades. His brother would become King John or Robin Hood. You get the picture. The English power base was in and around Dublin. Controlling the rest of Ireland was always challenging. And here in Ulster, the O'Neills of Tyrone were particularly challenging. They'd brought Scots over to get rid of the English during the reign of Robert the Bruce. I've got a video about that. 250 years later, at the end of Elizabeth of England's reign, Hugh O'Neill, Earl of Tyrone, was at it again. Which begs the question, when's the right time to give in to invaders? When should the people of Ukraine give up? At what point do you say, okay, I accept the change? I'll speak your language instead of mine, wear your clothes, follow your rules and customs. How long should we hold out? If Hitler had successfully invaded the British Isles, should we have put up resistance or just accept Nazi rule? How long does it make sense to resist? A year? 2 years? 10 years? Not a generation, surely. If your dad was killed by Nazi invaders, you should be over it by now, right? I'm not positing an answer. I'm posing a question. I don't know the answer. Now, you might say that I've chosen an extreme example. I'd say I'm choosing an example that's recognisable. Which invading regimes didn't demonstrate brutality? Romans? Mongols? Normans? Spanish, French, British, Americans, Russians, Chinese? The O'Neills certainly committed brutal acts. Hugh O'Neill, that we're on about, committed brutalities, duplicities and authoritarian policies. He sided first for and then against the English government. The bit that was against was the 9 Years' War, which lasted a while. Now, we don't have 9 years, so long story short, O'Neill and his Irish allies enlisted the support of the Spanish against the English. But it all ended with Hugh O'Neill as the last holdout finally surrendering to Queen Elizabeth's representative on the 30th of March 1603, not realising that she'd died 6 days earlier. Damn it! Always check for a pulse. Enter James VI. Now first, the man credited with the plantations in Ulster, the Ulster Scots, Scotch Irish, call them what you will, the ones that ultimately led to Orangemen in Ireland and Hillbillies in America. Pick your favourite. We've all got one. Now, James wasn't the first to attempt to plant English Protestants in Ireland. Elizabeth had tried it before him with brutal methods and disastrous results. James himself had tried the same tactics against his Gaels in the Highlands and Islands. If you want to know how, you'll need to watch my other videos on the ethnic cleansing of James VI. All I'll say is that he was now more cautious. James liked the idea of planting Protestant, English and now Scots in this troublesome northern part of Ireland so recently cowed after the 9 Years' War. But Hugh O'Neill and the other rebels had been allowed to keep their lands as part of the surrender conditions. So where would James get the land to settle these civilised English-speaking Protestants? If you watch my video, Who Started the Scotch Irish, I talk about the private plantation and settlement that was making the eastern counties of Down and Antrim the most Scottish in Ulster. And two of the guys that I mention in it were the English Deputy Governor of Ireland and the Scotsman who would be appointed Bishop of Derry. And between them, they made life more and more difficult for Hugh O'Neill, Earl of Tyrone, and his pal, the Earl of Tyrconnell. Now remember, this was the time of Guy Fawkes and the Gunpowder Plot. Catholic-Protestant tension was at a high. James's trust of Catholics was at a low. Eventually, whether through exasperation at the humiliation or possibly genuine fear that the crown were going to come after their lives, the Earl of Tyrone, the Earl of Tyrconnell and around 60 of their followers set off in a ship to Europe on the 4th of September 1607, and they never came back. They call this the Flight of the Earls. Now, it couldn't have worked out better for James. With the Gaelic nobility gone, these departing Earls could be convicted of treason and their lands seized. Now James had land to hand out to those warm, cuddly, English-speaking Protestants. Even better, the next year, the Lord of Ovation was at his wits' ends with the Governor of Derry, and he started another hopelessly doomed rebellion. Did we decide when the right time to give in was? James now had more lands to hand out. So, in an arduous process, up to 1610, a scheme was worked out whereby big chunks of Ulster were divided up into estates, which would be taken over by Scottish and English gentlemen of means. Not nobility, but lairds. They were called undertakers. They had to bring in Scots and or English tenants to settle and farm the land, but no Irish. In fact, it was a stipulated condition that the undertaker had to build a defensible castle, tower or strong house to protect against the locals. Each county would be divided roughly into 5 precincts, 2 for the Scots and the rest for the English. You see, James wanted each county to contain a mixture of Scots and English. You see, he wanted to show that these two kingdoms could come together. And by civilising the Irish Gaels into English-speaking Protestants, preferably Episcopalians, forced them into a single, unified culture of Britishness. And if this social experiment could be made to succeed in the most difficult of his 3 kingdoms, then why not all over? Oh, what a glorious legacy of unity he'd leave! And the symbol of unity and harmony would be the north of Ireland. Now, if you're in Scotland, the trip across the Irish Sea seems easier than if you're in England. Let's be honest, a lowland Scot probably has less opportunities to hold him back than his English counterpart, so uprooting yourself to cross the Irish Sea seems more attractive to the Scots, and they applied in large numbers. Now, that doesn't mean that a new start across the sea was easy. It still takes a special type of person. Have you ever watched one of those telly programmes where a family have to try to decide whether to emigrate to Australia or New Zealand, and they're trying to work out if they can afford it, what the lifestyle will be like, and then they're made to watch some video footage of their family greeting into the camera, "Shona, don't leave us, let your man go alone, he was never good enough for you, we'll look after the bairns, he snogged your sister at the wedding reception." I still live in the same county today as I grew up in. And barring my college days, I've never lived more than a 50-mile radius from my birthplace. You won't catch me leaving Scotland for sunshine and a better way of life. Screw that. But imagine what it would have been like going to where they don't speak your language to cut new land where the landlord was required by law to build a big protective house for himself because the locals are so hostile that they've only just finished a killing war because of folk like you. And to top it all, when you get there, it'll still be raining. Now, if that sounds challenging, would you rather be one of the indigenous people? Thrown off the land, replaced by those foreign-tongued, haughty-nosed, sharp-elbowed, teeth-bearing interlopers as you try to scratch survival on the edges? 400 years later, the descendants of those locals still resent the loss of independence and cultural change that migration brought. Of course, the descendants of the migrants have now been there for 400 years, and they fear a swing back. And aren't they entitled to be there and protect their culture and way of life as they have done for 400 years? When is the time to accept change? Is compromise defeat? I don't know. Truth be told, large chunks of both of these groups have buggered off around the world and faced change anyway. As a tour guide, a few years ago, I was driving a lovely elderly American couple around Skye, and they couldn't understand the big problem of resolving the current Brexit problem in that particular week. I explained that if the UK left the EU, then there had to be customs borders between the UK and the EU. But that meant a customs border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland to the south. Well, one side in the Northern Ireland debate would never let that happen. So the suggestion was, why don't we do the customs checks in the boats crossing the Irish Sea, in between Great Britain and Ireland, leaving the whole island of Ireland as a single unit? Well, the other side in Northern Ireland would die before they'd allow that. The situation was that a decision made by voters in England and Wales meant that people in Ireland faced the potential of a violent and embittered stalemate because of a flood of Presbyterians from Scotland 400 years ago. One of the most interminable problems of Brexit faced by the government of the United Kingdom was coping with James's attempt to create the United Kingdom 400 years ago. But it was really just a continuation of the policy of plantation and ethnic cleansing of Gaels on the Isle of Lewis a decade before. I'm going to leave a link to my video on that in a second, but first, a question. Brexit, Irish unity, Scottish independence, Aboriginal land rights, cultural imperialism, Highland clearance, racial oppression, imperialist oppression, class struggle, name your hot button issue of choice. At what point is it right to accept defeat? If you want to know about the ethnic cleansing of James VI, then there's another video coming up on screen now. In the meantime, Hammy and Doch is going to be lamb alive. Cheerio and Rasta.